Welcome to Pivot to First. Hi, I'm Mike Seidel. I'm the CTO at Pivot CX. Every day I get to work with some of the brightest minds in the industry with one goal, turning hiring and people strategy into a competitive advantage. Hi, I'm Mike Seidel with Pivot CX, and today I'm joined by Robin Schooling. She's been a podcaster for over 10 years with Drive-Thru HR. You should really check out her podcast. It's absolutely excellent. She also just joined the team at CLO Talent as Vice President, Consulting Growth and Innovation. And I really can't think of anybody better to talk about what recruiters actually do, what they should be doing, and why 74% of recruiting teams are underperforming. But before we get into all of that, Robin, could you share a little bit about how you got where you are and what you're doing at CLO?
Sure. Hey, Mike. It's my pleasure to be joining you on this show, and looking forward to our conversation because it is something I have lived with throughout my career, I guess, which gets us to how I've ended up where I am. The beauty part is I started in recruiting many years ago. And started in recruiting at an agency, actually, way back in the day before I went in-house recruiting, in-house HR. And even though I've sort of gone down a different path these last few years with my career, I truly still consider myself a practitioner. I think I've just never lost it and get to keep my hand in every now and again with a few client engagements. So it's never left me. And as I transitioned sort of into the world of consulting with my previous organization, Paradis Group, which was acquired by CLO, it's really kind of come full circle for me, because now in my role, I get to interact with all the different practice areas of our CLO consulting practice. Most people think of CLO, of course, as an RPO and talent acquisition, which of course is what we are very well known for. But we also have this really robust strategic consulting group where we do everything from TA strategy and transformation to technology to employer branding and recruitment marketing. So I get to still touch all of those things that I've loved since my first day in the profession.
Well, and you get to look into a lot of companies and you get to see what's going on inside of lots of different companies, don't you?
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to a few big picture questions. What is it exactly that you think most business people think that recruiters do with their time?
Oh, wow. I think business leaders and candidates, for that matter, probably have very similar visions of what recruiters do. They think that recruiters, wait around for people to apply for jobs. They think that recruiters take great delight in saying no to candidates. And they think tech candidates on the candidate side think that recruiters sit around and devise ways to send them spam. So I think those are some sort of common misconceptions about how recruiters spend their time. And, I think when we look in-house and we look at business leaders or hiring managers, they often think that recruiters, or for that matter, anybody in the HR, people and culture space, they think that recruiters sit around and just devise, cumbersome processes to hire and get people on board, as if we take great delight in crafting these Byzantine, rules and channels.
So what is it that the recruiters are actually really doing in most companies? Because I when I go look at our client base, I see usually between senior management and the talent acquisition team, just a huge gap in understanding what actually is really going on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, what recruiters do, and this is very, very high level, but I think recruiters um, are about building relationships. They're
Hmm.
building relationships internally with the leadership team, with senior executives, with department heads, and they're building internal relationships with hiring managers. They're also building relationships externally, constantly, obviously,
Right.
with candidates and trying to get those candidates to convert to applicants, right? So a lot of it is relationship building, which is very high level. Of course, then there's the foundational work that goes into that. But recruiters are, uh, uh, you know, juggling multiple things at one time constantly. It is a skill that is needed, I think, to be a really successful recruiter, because things are always changing. There are changing business needs. There's, new opening and closing of requisitions or changing of requisitions. There's adjustments in hiring or hiring processes. So recruiters are very adept at juggling change, and adaptability. Um, Recruiters are constantly balancing the needs of the business and the needs and desires of multiple hiring managers. So it's not uncommon in many organizations for a recruiter to be dealing with 30, 50 plus hiring managers. When you look at the number of their requisitions, kind of who they're supporting, that's a lot of people to keep happy and to, again, have those strong relationships to keep that going. um, Recruiters are um, also spending their time, and I think we'll probably delve into this a little bit, but recruiters are spending their time using technology smartly. And I think the rest of the business doesn't necessarily see, nor do they need to know how the sausage is made, right? They don't really
Right.
care. um, but the skill set of today's recruiters and the ability to work in different platforms and smartly use technology for everything from process automation to communication to whatever. Recruiters are really adept at, again, it's balancing and juggling those things. And I think the other thing that recruiters are really doing, again, nobody's coming in and looking up the hood. We only hear the stories when things don't work, but
Right.
recruiters are really spending a lot of time, and truly are focusing on the candidate experience. And they really do. We talk about it. It's a buzzword. We get that, but it is so crucial and so important. And recruiters are often the, that line of defense there. Everything's around the candidate experience is housed in that, let's be real, in that TA department. And
Oh yeah.
I've never met a recruiter. Well, I take that back. I probably have met a few over the years, but very, very few recruiters who have said that they don't care about candidate experience. They really, really do. And so they do spend a lot of time thinking about that. And,
You
and
know,
you know and how that fits into their process and their day and their workflow. It's always top of mind.
one of the things that surprises me when I work with recruiters, and it really blows my mind, is how much time and effort goes into working with those 30 to 50 different hiring managers that
Yeah.
that recruiters are working with. It's a really hard job because, okay, they're building these relationships with the candidates over here, but then a lot of times they have 30 totally different ways of thinking about hiring,
Right.
and they're dealing with managers that have, some of them, 20, 30 years experience hiring people, some
Hmm.
people that have 2 weeks of experience hiring people.
Hmm.
So here you go. You get this recruiter that's went out there and found, 15, 20 really good candidates. Then they go take the candidates to the hiring managers. And the hiring manager goes, I'll get back to him after I get back from vacation.
Right. Right. Right.
And I get to watch that play out every day, with companies that we engage with that are using our software. And it just absolutely blows my mind how hard it's got to be for the recruiters to deal with hiring managers that just don't realize how important
Mhm.
recruiting is right now.
Mhm.
You know, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's and that's so top of mind for us these last few years especially, um, but it's kind of always been that way of the need for recruiters to kind of light the fire under hiring managers. Even back in the days of let's schedule in a paper and pencil calendar with the hiring
Right.
managers. I think um, here's yet another task to give recruiters, but I think again a good recruiter is always doing this anyway, and that is remembering. Good recruiters should remember that they are the subject matter expert within their organization around all things talent acquisition. And they have a wealth of knowledge. And so part of the role of being a recruiter is to educate your hiring managers. And that can be in one-off conversations, that can be at an intake meeting. We hiring manager Bob says, oh, I need to hire a senior controller, whatever. And it's at that intake meeting to talk to hiring manager Bob about, let's look at the job description and, let's make sure everything is still correct and skill sets and blah, blah, blah. And coming into that intake meeting, even with some market intelligence to kind of set expectations up front with the hiring manager, which includes things like, well, here's what the market's looking like right now for that skill set. Here's where I think we can recruit from. Here's a projection perhaps of the type of candidates we'll get. And then weaving in right at the get-go what those expectations are going to be from the candidates. And that can include, okay, hiring manager Bob, when we get to the point where I am bringing you a slate of a candidate or two or three,
Right.
let's have a commitment from each other. It's an internal, service level agreement, right? Of, gee, hiring manager Bob, when I present you with a candidate, can you give me a commitment that we will get this person scheduled, at least on the schedule, on the calendar, within 48 hours or whatever it may be. So I think recruiters have to do a lot of educating ahead of time and continuously with their hiring managers as well as with others in the organization.
Sure. That's to me, the biggest surprise whenever I work with recruiters is exactly what you just said. It's how much time they have to spend
Yeah.
working with the hiring managers. And a lot of what they're working on is just really basic stuff like, look, I got you a great candidate. This person's going to take a job somewhere else in a
Yeah.
week, maybe 2 or 3 days. Could
Yeah.
you please interview them?
Yeah.
It's amazing how hard it is to get that in place. And a lot of companies that we work with, the only way to get that fixed is to get, you go to the very top, go to the CEO and go get the CEO to go,
Right.
guys, you have to interview people quickly. If the talent acquisition team sends you a candidate, you've
Yeah.
got to get back to them within 24 hours, 48 hours. Don't make the candidate wait, because if you do, they'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah. And one of the data points that um, I've seen work in some organizations, and it it depends on the organization, depends on, again, what that message is from the CEO, for example, what access you have in recruiting or in HR to kind of this sort of data. I would try to get this data, right? And that's having a benchmark for what it costs, and this may be position specific, department specific, or across the organization, what it costs in revenue each day that a position is open, and use that as one of the talking points with these hiring managers or senior leaders to say, look, for every day that we leave a position open, we're losing, $1,000 in revenue or whatever the number may be, and make that conversation about, the bottom line finances of the business to drive that back home.
So that kind of leads to the next question here, and Josh Bersin recently put out a report, human-centered talent acquisition,
Hmm.
and in there, one of the really interesting facts was 74% of recruiting teams simply aren't performing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think a lot of it goes back to really how we kicked off the conversation, which is what are recruiters spending their time on? And the reality is they're spending their time on a lot of stuff. And sometimes there's not enough time in the day to get all these things done. So I think that's the reality for far too many recruiters. I think another reason, and I'm not laying blame on anybody. It just kind of is what it is. But so often when we look at, we're going to bring in new technology, for example, new work technology, HRTA, whatever.
Oh yeah.
We're going to solve this problem because we're going to free up this time. And that may very well be, but we sometimes bring in technology. So on the TA side, right, where, it looks great to the candidate, because we're all about the candidate experience.
Yeah.
What is that experience like for the recruiter as well? So sometimes, and we see this on, HR systems all the time, that the folks that are in using it within the company, the recruiter, the HR generalist, whoever it may be, their experience may be more cumbersome and disconnected, and we don't really, the collective we don't really go to our users in an organization and ask them, what is your experience like? You're the recruiter, you're the HR generalist, you're the HR business partner, whatever. What are you experiencing with this technology, and can we make that better? Is it streamlining your work? Is it making your life easier? Is it making you more effective? And if the answer is
Robin,
no, let's look at it.
Robin, you're right on. And I've never seen a category of software. If I just took work tech kind of software, or say
Yeah.
anything that smells like software for recruiting, so applicant tracking systems,
Right.
all the different things you can plug into an applicant tracking system. So many of them are disconnected from each other, and they all do a valuable thing for the recruiter. The problem is the amount of effort and time it takes for the recruiter to make it all work. It is just really daunting. And then you add to that, a lot of times recruiters get caught up into having duties like compliance and things like that get kind of shoveled over to them.
Right.
By the time you're done, what you have is this situation where, sure, we could add that chat bot and it could help, but once we get out of that initial implementation, we have to retrain the bot. I don't have any time to do that.
I went and I did some work with a client last year, which it was absolutely the poster child for this experience. So they had, they had most of the bells and whistles, right? And they were small, mid-sized business, so they didn't have all the bells and whistles, but they had a decent, fairly robust ATS, and they had a good onboarding platform and this sort of thing. But things were disconnected. Things were not, had not several years before been set up properly, for one thing. So things were still disconnected. And so when I went in there to kind of start some work with the team,
sure,
and I was watching, what are you doing in your day-to-day? And the recruiter showed me that as she was dispositioning candidates in the ATS, she then went out of the ATS and went over into her email server, and did all of her messaging out of the ATS over here. And so I just kind of like watched. I'm like, oh, why do you do that? And it came to be that the ATS had the capability to do it. Nobody had set it up once upon a time. But the amount of time that she spent going in and out and manually doing things was eye-opening. But also not uncommon. I think we run into that a lot.
I think it's really common. We see it a lot when we go in, and one of the features of our software that's really different than other things in our category is that we integrate out of the
Yeah.
box with about
Yeah.
38 different applicant tracking systems. So there's no double data entry and cut and paste
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on. And it's amazing to me just how much cutting and pasting you see recruiters doing between
Yes.
the ATS, the HRIS, and then, if they, like you said, email, all these
Yes.
different tools. Oh, I got to make an offer letter and it's a Word template. Now I got to make
Yes.
that offer in
Yes.
there.
Which I
I
then
got
have
to
to turn into a PDF to send off. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and
Yeah.
all of those things add so much friction and so much time, and, it's amazing to me that, we haven't found better ways of doing it, or if we are in a situation where we can find ways to do it better, it's amazing how resistant people are to making
Mm-hmm.
changes, and right now, I think it is the right time to start looking at change because the market that we're in, this tight labor market, this whole
Mm-hmm.
if you look at everything, even if we have a recession, we're still going to be fully employed. There
Right.
is not going to be a situation where all of a sudden the job market goes back to 2015 or something, and we have,
Mm-hmm.
8 available candidates for every open job.
Mm-hmm.
Just not going to be that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is, I think, time that people start really looking at, hey, what is my recruiting team spending time on, and
Mm-hmm.
are those the right things? And I think you
Mm-hmm.
you kind of locked into two really important things. There's building relationships with candidates, and there's helping the hiring managers make their hires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all the other stuff, really, which, by the way, I think last I looked, Sherm said that's what the recruiters spend 78% of their time on, all the other stuff.
Right.
Um, maybe it's time to start really looking at recruiting and going, hey, is your team able to work on the right things?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not that they
It's
don't want to,
scheduling.
it's can they do it?
Right. Right.
Is it possible? So that leads me to the next question here, which is, if you see a team that really is struggling and is one of these, 74% of the recruiting teams that
Mm-hmm.
is underperforming, what really needs to change there? What are the things that you look at right away and go, hey,
Mm-hmm.
where's the low hanging fruit? Where can I fix
Mm-hmm.
this thing?
Well, and I think what's interesting is with the momentary, I'm just going to call it a pause, let's say, sort of in the greater economy right now, where there's just some, in certain industries and certain companies, right, the little hesitancy of, okay, we're going to maybe, slow our roll on some hiring right now. This is the perfect time actually for TA teams who are maybe taking a momentary slowdown. This is the perfect time for them to go in and spend their time assessing where they are with their their workflows, their process, their kind of their mission of their TA team. Let's say even let's start real high, right? What's our mission? What are we here for?
Sure.
But I think the first step, and I love this stuff. Not everybody does, but it's mapping out as on whiteboards, on Visio, on whatever the tool of choice is, your flow charts, your process flow charts is
Sure.
the easiest thing to start with, because more often than not, what a team will find is that there are these extraneous steps that have gone in over time, that are still there for some reason. And so are all these steps, is the process working as it should? Are these steps that are in there necessary? I'm a great believer in simplifying, stripping it all down, simplifying, and building it back up. And so if you've got a momentary pause, I think it's really the best, sort of a natural time to do it. But I think that process improvement view, it should be constant. And so it's critical as a TA team, as an HR team, for any HR process, to just really regularly be looking at what is our process, what is our flow, what makes sense, what can we take out that we don't need anymore. Because 10 years ago, some SVP wanted a signature in this part of the process. Does that still matter? And just constantly be tweaking and iterating and making it more effective, for those internal users or process owners, as well as for anybody externally or who may be interacting with the process, with the technology, and all the pieces that come with it.
No, I think you're right. I think that's spot on. That's exactly what most companies need to do. Take a look at what you're doing, and
Yeah.
um, I think in a lot of cases, especially talent acquisition, just accrues process steps over the years. Like you said, it's a VP that wanted a signature. It's somebody who left the company a long time ago that just had to have it a certain way,
Yep.
and we're still doing it that way.
Yep.
And one thing that we do a lot of times with customers that we're onboarding with our software just is ask a real simple question. How long does it take between when somebody applies or says they're interested in working for you? How long does it take between that moment and when there's human to human contact with that candidate?
Yes. Yes.
And that little measurement has been absolutely remarkable because the answer in most cases is weeks and weeks,
Yeah.
and it should be answered in minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ease with which now
Oh,
TA
the tech
teams
is there.
make that interaction be within minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, the technology's there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so easy to hook. You've got this applicant tracking system collecting all these applies from all these job boards, and
Hmm.
you've got talent communities and CRMs, all of which are collecting data for you
Hmm.
in real time. How hard is it to hook it up to a system that can say hi to the
Yeah.
candidate and then
Yeah.
get you connected when the candidate's ready to talk to you? That
Yeah.
technology is it's off the shelf now, and
Yeah.
it's amazing how few companies understand that, and we're still operating in this world where we've got 3-4 weeks to get back to a candidate. And the truth
Yeah.
is, if you're, we measured, we did a big report where we looked at about 500,000 job applications, and we looked at how quickly candidates respond, and we found that on average, if you reach out to a candidate immediately when they apply, the candidate's going to respond within 2 minutes and
Mm.
about 50 seconds.
Hmm.
So if you apply and I say hi to you, I can expect to hear back from you in less than
Hmm.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can absolutely get a hold of candidates, and that kind of leads to something I hear a lot from. I hear a lot from recruiters, and I hear a lot from CEOs, and that's that. Well, we're trying really hard to recruit here, but the candidates just aren't responding.
Mm.
What is it that causes that?
Mm. I think, and this is anecdotal. I have no data to reference in this, so this is purely anecdotal. I think a big cause of it is exactly what you said in terms of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I applied for a job and it's 2-3 weeks later before I get my first outreach, which is potentially via email, either I've moved on, I've forgotten about it, I'm focusing on something else, or I think, man, I was a perfect fit for that. I can't believe it took them 3 weeks. So I think candidates, the world is their oyster, many of them right now, and so they've moved on to the next great thing. I think time. I think that expectation for immediacy is much higher than we even think it is, because in our day-to-day lives, we're used to immediate, right? I'm watching TV. I want to immediately find a movie, search a movie, and be watching it in 2 minutes. And so if I'm applying for a job, I expect that as well. And, I think it's the TA team, and every industry is going to be different, certainly, but it's the TA team knowing who their typical candidates are, when they are looking for jobs. And you can go and search and find this data, certainly. But I think back one of my last, in-house HR jobs that I had, which was not that terribly long ago, was in the casino industry. And so we were, it's 24/7, 365, right? And so this was about 5-6 years ago. And so our candidates were applying at all times of day or night. I know lots of applicant activity over the weekends, at night, all of that. And the our HR team was pretty much a, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 thing. Well, that just didn't fly because we needed to get back with people. We needed to be responding to our candidates real quickly. So I brought in a chat bot that was via text.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our candidates, our applicants, like to text, and so the chat bot served exactly that purpose of here's a job, here's the job, and they could start interacting immediately. And it was, a script, obviously, and here's what it's required. What job are you interested in? Here's what's required. Here's the hours, blah, blah, blah. Yes, no, very easy, kind of
Yep.
script to work through. But it allowed people on a weekend or Sunday nights were a big day of applications for us and big activity on this chatbot. But it allowed candidates to kind of get through the initial screen, determine if they were interested, and then feed into the follow-up so that by the next morning, boom, we're getting them scheduled because that conversation happened over the weekend. They got that immediate response because these were folks working grave shift, swing shift, nights and weekends only type of thing. Well, that's when they were up. That's when they wanted and needed to talk to somebody.
So you're saying you're not going to catch that person that wants to work at midnight at 11 in the morning.
Yeah. Chances are not.
Yeah.
Chances are not.
There's just so much of that out there where there's just this mismatch between what we're doing process wise, and meeting candidates where they are is just such a lost. You've got to do that. You've got to.
Yes.
You just got to go to where they are. So from a big picture perspective, what do you see being the big changes in talent acquisition over the next year?
Man, I think we are going to, and a lot of folks have been talking about this for a number of years. This is not an original thought from the brain of Robin by any stretch of the imagination. But I think we've sort of ramped up towards an acceptance of hiring for skills and not hiring for jobs. And I think, you start to see this, you're seeing this happening with some companies and sort of how they're out recruiting, how they're sourcing candidates. And I think that that's going to become much stronger, and it's going to cause in the world of TA and among more and more companies to, are we hiring by job title? That's kind of got to go away. Or are we hiring by skill set, either an existing skill set or what we can train somebody to do? I think that's going to be the biggest continuing evolution, is looking at skills versus
that is one of the that is really interesting, because that is a mismatch that you see a lot, especially when you're talking. I'm talking to a hiring manager type. I'm talking to somebody who's they're going, I want somebody that's done this job or this job.
Yes.
And so, the conclusion is, okay, I want to look for a job title on a resume.
Right.
And reality is, what we really should be looking for is someone who can do that job.
Right.
That's a very different question than, did that person hold that job?
Right. Right.
And I think that's something that frankly, a lot of people don't understand about hiring. I think they think that, I'm going to hire a CTO, so I need somebody who has been a CTO.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And well, maybe you do, but reality is you probably need someone who is ready to be a CTO.
Right. Right.
So very, very different animal, and something that I think a lot of, we've been spoiled for a very long time because the labor market wasn't tight, and it was always easy to find somebody who had experience doing that. Right. So big change, for sure.
Yeah.
So, just kind of close things up. Is there anything that you wanted to share with our audience that we haven't talked about?
I think another aspect of, and this is sort of, we've been living this for, decades, quite frankly, but heightened awareness in the last couple of years, rightly so. And I think it's it's only going to keep getting stronger, which is companies paying attention internally, but also on the TA side, and when they're recruiting and when they're sourcing and when they're telling their story. And that is companies realizing that diversity and inclusion, equity, belonging, they're not buzzwords, and they're not just placards on the wall, but the understanding that DE&I is so embedded in the culture of the company, and that emerging talent, new talent, young professionals, especially, are looking for companies that are doing the right thing, that are champions of DE&I, that are, willing to talk about social issues. I think that's going to be a big shift. We've seen it. We see it happening. We see stories when it doesn't happen more often than when it does with certain companies, where they get caught, with their, knickers down or something. But that's sort of a key cultural shift in the workplace that will permeate every aspect of the employee experience, from existing retention issues to how are we going to attract candidates. Are we again, it's meeting folks where they are, but if job seekers are looking for something, are we matching what they're looking for around these kind of social issues?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you're right. Things are just changing so fast and so much, and maybe now is not the time to be doing business like it's 1986.
Right.
It really isn't.
Probably not.
When I have 5 kids, and they're all at the age where they're entering the workforce, and it is amazing the difference in what they see is important in an employer.
Yes.
I think you or I would have looked at it very differently when we were entering the workforce. Maybe not, but there's a lot of things our kids are worried about that we didn't even think about back in the day.
Yeah. And they're willing to raise it as an issue. That's really, I think, the issue, the difference.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I have a few questions that I always like to ask people at the end, and I'll start the easy question. So what business book have you read that was really transformative to you?
I would say the best.
That is a tough
one
question.
I've read. I'm actually looking up the title because I can't remember the actual title of it, and I almost had it wrong. But David Graeber, who died several years ago, and he wrote a bunch of different books over the years. He about income and this sort of thing. But one of his last books before he passed was Bullshit Jobs. And one of my favorites. It really just talks about the fact that we have a lot of sort of jobs that we've created over the years. So you think of the bureaucracy of middle management in a given organization, and jobs that exist for reasons that we sometimes don't know why. And those are what he called bullshit jobs.
Okay, I've got to ask you this. So that book is one of my all-time favorites, and it also, I think it also is really relevant right now because everybody's talking about quiet quitting.
Yes.
And every time I get asked about that, I always my response is, if you're experiencing quiet quitting, you're having your management is in a failure mode, because you've got people doing jobs that matter so little that you don't even notice when they stop doing their job.
Right.
I mean, you're not even noticing their work. It's that unimportant.
Right.
Is the bullshit job really the root cause of quiet quitting?
I think the bullshit job is one of the reasons. Yes. I think the other reason, quiet quitting is, what was disengagement 3 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
But it's, I think the other reason is, I think there's bullshit jobs. And then I think there's lack of lack of recognition and thanks and acknowledgement when people are, and it's okay, everybody doesn't have to be going at 150 miles, all the time. But if somebody's doing steady 80, 90 miles an hour, whatever, a pat on the back, hey, good job, and that might be okay. You need those steady eddies, as the term always was,
Yeah.
to keep going, and that's okay to have folks like that.
Okay, next question here. Favorite movie?
Ooh, Velvet Goldmine.
Okay. And then final question. Anything that we missed that you want to share, or we cover everything?
As we're chatting today, we are at the cusp of a football season, and I'm ready. So that's what I'll leave us with.
I have to agree with you. I'm ready for some football for sure. Thanks very much for joining us, Robin Schooling of Cielo Talent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.